viewers, and welcome back to the Self-Made Auto channel. If you're new here, welcome to our channel. We've got us a 2010 Hyundai Elantra. Needs some rear brakes, so stick around. First things first, we will get the brake caliper off from the bracket. A couple bolts, some 14mm wrench, socket, whatever it is that you're using. That little guy off, make sure that's good. We're just going to give it a squeeze. Just pull in on it, push the piston back in. She's crusty and rusty. Not leaking yet. It's not very heavy. Let her hang there for a second. We'll go get a hook. On these, foolishly, Hyundai puts the rear control arm right in the way of the caliper bracket bolt. So I'm going to get a hook for our caliper, hang that out of the way, and then we're going to have to pull this control arm bolt out and beat that little guy up out of there. Oh, what do we need here? Looks like some 17s. Oh, there's a freaking phone. Bolt and a nut. Well, what is all the talking going on over here, lady? All right. Got that all sorted. One of those wacko YouTubers calling. Go figure. Mrs. O's not here to field my phone calls, so I'm totally getting burned on that today. Out she comes. So there's the bolt. Take that little guy out. Get a hammer and do the Michael Jackson. Just beat it, beat it. I don't really know if that's a good reference to use or not. Now we gotta reach in with our 14, get the hidden bolt. They can be pretty rusty, so. Now don't take that one out all the way yet until you loosen up the other one. That way it doesn't come up and catch you in the teeth, you know. We'll get the upper bolt also. There. Didn't quite fit there, fella. Where are ya? Like I say, those will get rusty. Now if they do snap off, don't get all excited. Just take the other bolt out and then pull your caliper bracket off with the rotor. You should be good to go. We gotta take and get the screws out. Now these ones are coming out easy because this has had a brake job done before apparently. Otherwise use a impact driver. Probably have to give them a little whack, then they'll come right out. So if the rotor doesn't want to cooperate with you, pull the rubber plug out, which should line up with one of these holes. You have to spin it around and line it up with the star adjuster. Use a flat blade screwdriver, not a Phillips head. Reach in and turn the adjuster wheel to back it off. We've showed this in hundreds of videos, probably not hundreds, but at least one. Always sound like a broken record doing this portion of it. You have to clean your caliper bracket, which we've already done. I just throw them in the sandblaster, give them a toot, shine them up on the wire wheel. It's good to go. Whatever you do, you have to get the rust off back to the base metal. That's the important part. Little square file works beautiful. Just using a wire wheel usually just polishes up the rust, giving the appearance to be clean, when indeed it isn't. So we're going to pull out the guide pins here one at a time. make sure they're sufficiently lubed. Now, one thing I will mention is up here where the rubber goes on, sometimes that little groove there will get all plugged up on you with rust and whatnot. So that has to be cleaned off. I'll hit them up on the wire wheel. Cleans them out pretty nice. Give it a little toot of brake caliper grease, silicone grease, whatever it is that you use. And then make sure you grease up in that groove. That'll keep it from getting all crusty on you again. Don't overdo it. This one's not too bad, but you can see how much crust it has up in there. Hit her up real quick. And we're good as gold. I mean, not quite that good, but it's good. Trust me. Don't overdo it on the lube either. Of course, we've already preached that. And how many brake jobs can we do here? You know? Always replace your hardware. Of course, we always say that too. Don't reuse it. The hardware wears with your brakes. I've shown that in other videos, how the hardware wears out, becomes thin. And of course in the rust belt, you know, it always accumulates rust on the back side of it. Now be sure to lube the bracket, as always. Or if you have time, prime and paint it, and then lube it. That always lasts a bit longer, but this will usually get you to the end of the brake pads without giving it the big squeeze. Of course, I did not show removing the pads from the bracket, which is pretty standard procedure. Getting the pads out, beat, pry, hammer, whatever you have to do to get those out. Man, these things got the stink. Where are they from? India. Woo! Get a whiff of that. Got that stink from riding on the boat, must be. We're gonna put our pads in. Squealers going on the inside on these ones. We'll line them up. Now they should move nice and free in the brackets, okay? You should not have to beat them in or grind the ears down, but they should move nice and freely. So there's that, we'll get them set up. Of course I do the other side also, so I'll get this taken care of while I'm here. Oh yeah, look at that. Vintage. 2005 Wherever Brake Clean. That's what I'm talking about. It's like fine wine. And I tell you what, this stuff has some stank. I don't know if the EPA regulations were different, but oh man. Found a few cans of this kicking around from way back when I first opened up. Still has its propellant, still just as good. A little bit stinkier though. So instead of making all the dust on the parking brake shoes airborne, give them a little toot, clean off the old grease on the hub. Don't be afraid to use up a good can of brake parts cleaner. Now prior to doing this, I should have mentioned that of course I test drove the vehicle and I cycled the parking brake a few times while driving. That'll help remove the brake rotor a whole lot easier because first of all, no one ever uses their parking brake. Ever, unless it's some young teenage kid whipping e-brakes, playing Tokyo Drift, or the occasional person that uses it, or if it's a stick. So what that'll do is cycling your parking brake as you're driving, you know, use caution. Burns all the rust off the inside of the rotor and makes the removal process easier. So that's Free Tip Tuesday. Just have a look at your parking brake shoes, particularly up here on the corners, on the top and bottom. Give them a wiggle, make sure they have not started to rust jack or become delaminated from their backing. material, their backing plate, I guess it would be, or their shoe, because they're just glued on. If they are, if you can get your fingernail under them and pick them off, well, it's time to replace them, because if they break loose and they get all wadded up, it causes a big mess. Now, some people are going to disagree with this portion of it, but that's okay. I've got broad shoulders. Done it like this for years. Usually the parking brake mechanism, I'll spray it with a little fluid film, let it just kind of cling on there. Being that I know the parking brake works, that'll keep that mechanism freed up. And then I'll give a little toot on top of the star adjuster wheel to keep that from seizing up. So when we adjust them, so you can see your star wheel down here, we're going to be reaching through the rotor, and this is what we're going to be doing inside there where you can't see. We're going to be turning the star wheel to adjust it out. So right now I'm going to adjust it out a little bit, make sure it moves nice and free. I'll give that a little toot of fluid film on the end that it pivots, and then on the whole shebang, I'll let it just ooze out of there. I should get everybody in the comment section going bananas. You're gonna get that inside your brake drum. Your car ain't gonna stop. Oh my gosh, you're such a hack. I don't really know if that's what people sound like. But. So then I'll take and just crank it back in all the way. Now, if you want, you can elect at this point to disassemble your entire parking brakes, clean, lube, everything. If your little heart desires. I'm just going to wipe off the excess snot. Like I say, nobody ever uses these except for once a year if the guy doing the inspection actually checks it. When we have the fluid film out, we will spray the face of the hub all the way around. Now, a lot of people disagree with that too, but again, that's totally okay with me. Install our new rotor. Make sure you line up. The screw holes, we'll get them stuck back in. Definitely not with a flathead screwdriver, we won't. This little guy will work though. You don't have to kill these when you put them in, and if you broke them or had to drill them off, forget about it. You don't even need them. The majority of cars on the road don't have them. But just put them in lightly, just finger tight. Before we clean off the rotor, we're going to finish making our mess. I'm going to clean off the face of the piston because it has some rust buildup. If they're real nasty, buy new calipers, or if it's leaking, or if the dust boot is ripped. This one's actually pretty good for New York. Not a lot of garbage buildup there on the ears. I am going to get a little bit out that's down in the cracks there. Looks good. And then, of course, bust out some more brake parts cleaner and give it a good douche. Gotta admit, I kind of like this stuff. Then we're going to take and clean off our rotor, both inside and out. I probably should have mentioned you need to wipe out the inside prior to installing it, where the parking brake shoes drive. Wiped off. You can always clean it with soapy water too if you wanted to. Stick it right in the dishwasher, baby. But don't tell your wife. There. Beautiful. We'll go right back in that adjuster hole. Find our star wheel. We're going to crank it out until it locks up, which shouldn't take a whole lot of turns, considering the rotor's new, as long as your parking brake shoes aren't worn heavily. This way here we can make sure we have it adjusted properly. So right now, there's quite a large amount of drag on it. I'll keep going. Just Just make sure they're settled in or seated out all the way, nice and even, which they are. And we're going to back it back off. A few clicks. Got just a little bit of light drag there. When we cycle the park and brake, that will even them out, but I'm happy with that. Now there is a rubber plug, there should be, left in our old rotor here. Pop that out. I'm gonna give that a little to brake clean, not brake clean, fluid film. Pop that back in the adjuster hole. Now make sure you put that in before you put your calipers and stuff back on, because if you accidentally push it all the way through, well, you're gonna tear everything all back apart. Learn from my experience, I guess we'll call it. Take our loaded caliper bracket, stick that little guy back on, give our pad to squeeze. The bolts line back up. Of course, follow factory specs, whether or not they need to be Loctited or lubed or never seized or whatever you elect to do. Get that one started, and then of course put the lower bolt back in also. All right, here we go, free tip Friday. On a Friday, today's Friday, what do you know? Instead of trying to beat this back down through the top like a wild man, just bring it around town and hit it from the bottom, if you know what I mean. Get it lined up. A couple little taps, that'll save you a whole lot of frustration. Stick an alignment bar in there, and that should get you pretty close. Now you might have to spin this thing in. Oh man, am I not close? Must be, I'm just a whisker off. Close, nope. There she is. Now we can drive her home. She's almost all the way through. Now don't go smashing on it, but if you can see it's already through the other side. Give it a tap like a 16 penny. And then we'll put the nut back on. Now don't get all wild and tighten this up just yet, but get the nut started on it there. And what you're gonna have to do, or what I'm gonna do because it's on the lift, set the car down, stick your floor jack under it, jack the suspension back up to its normal ride height, then tighten the bolt down, and that's gonna prevent that bushing from getting all twisted up on you. So our caliper's already clean. That was done back in step 4, or maybe 5. But we ought to make sure it's pressed in all the way. Now these push in super easy, so I'm just gonna use a pair of channel locks here. Give it a little toot. Open your bleeder if you feel that is necessary. We won't get into that big debate. And then we're gonna lube up the ears on the caliper. Any of the metal contacts. A little lube on them. You can lube the pad if you like. And then on the inside, we're gonna lube up the face of the piston. Keep that from getting rusty, prevent squeals. We're gonna dig around through our cluttered up cart here to try and find the bolts. Make sure you don't have any pigtails in your brake hose by twisting the caliper up too many times. Too often we see that. We're going to start the top bolt so you have something to pivot it on, and then just slide it down over the pads and you're done. Of course, after you tighten it up, put the wheel on, pump up the brakes, check the brake fluid, all that business. Of course, tighten it to factory specs, and your caliper should move freely prior to pumping it up. One of those. can conclude. Check the brake fluid, pump up the brakes, not necessarily in that order. Take it for a little toot around town, make sure it feels good, no shimmy, shaking, noise, pedal pulsation, and make sure the park and brake works. And then just go back, have a little look, double check your work. Don't forget to tighten up them control arm bolts with the suspension either on the ground or jacked up to its ride height to avoid damaging that bushing. Always torque everything to specs, follow manufacturer's specifications, service manuals, all that business. Find us on our socials. If you like what we do, subscribe, ring the bell, and just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.